Hi, welcome back to part two. I think this is part two of the polymer clay face pendant tutorial. In this part of this tutorial, we'll talk about beads and stringing materials and selecting things to work with the face pendant, or even cabochon, because you don't have to use a face pendant. You could use a cabochon or even a button that you like. Back it on felt and do exactly what we're doing with this face pendant. So all I do, and I have tons of beads, so I just pulled out a few packages. What I usually do is I look at the face, and I've been looking at this face for a day now, and I've backed it on purple felt, but that doesn't mean anything to my final bead selection. I've got some black AO dynamite seed beads, and I've got, let's see, these are like a clear pink, and they're, let's see, it says they're cream soda. And I have this assortment tube of different size and pink beads. And then there's another tube of check glass naturals, like I call it a moonstone mix. And then I have some metallic pink 11-Os. And then I have some check glass bugle beads. These are not terribly long ones. Let's see if I can get it up, and they all jump out. But you can see here, that's the size of these bugle beads. So they're pretty long in comparison to the face. But they would work in the fringe. But that's all things that the fringe I'll be thinking about while I put the bezel on. And at first I had been thinking about using these, but they're really not the right colors for the face. And also I think most of these are 6-0 seed beads. The smaller the number, the bigger the bead, the bigger the hole. So these are really too big for this face. You open this tube. But that's the size of a single bead. And there's a mixture in here. There are some bugle beads that I might use in the mix, but I just thought that this bead would be a little bulky. Now, if you wanted it to go fast and you wanted your first row to like come up all the way to the side of the face, that would work, but it would make it very difficult to add additional beads, layering height-wise along the face, coming up into the eye. And it would also, you can't just do a single row and have fringe. That would be very difficult. You could, but I think it would look pretty flat. So I'm not going to use these beads. I usually start out with something like an 8-0 on a small face pendant. And I think for this pendant I'm going to use black, because I think you'll be able to see them better if I use black. But that's what those beads will look like. And the second row I may use these cream soda. They're the same size. These are 8-0s also. But I may use the cream soda because I think you'll be able to see as I change colors. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through a bead. It'll be easier this way. And then some of the fringe and the highlighting color I may do with these metallic beads. I think these are 11-Os. They're not the smallest, which 15s are as small as I'll go. These are 11s. These are next to the smallest, and these are pretty small. This is my favorite bead string, and it's actually fishing wire. You find it at the sporting goods store at Walmart's. It's spider wire. And this is 6-pound test. and there's 200 meters or 220 yards in this roll. I think it's about $8. At least it was when I bought this. You'll need scissors. You'll need pliers. And I use a John James size 10 beading needle. John James is my favorite. But you could use any brand, Coates & Clark, whatever brand you have. I use a size 10. And this is a size 10. If I can find it. There it is. This is a size 10 beading needle. And I'm going to pause because I think my clock is going to chime in. And let's see, so I showed this size 10 needle. It has a small eye, but the fishing monofilament goes through it without any problems. You can also use, this is called Nymo, which is a filament. It's a thread, and it's nylon and doesn't break very easily. Using glass beads, I like the monofilament better. Although you can also use this dandelion. I've had this a long time. And it's also a braided cord. And this doesn't react to water. It won't rot and break if it gets wet. So if you are making a beaded project and you think it may come into contact with water, say you go camping and you have a beaded bracelet that you wear all the time, this stuff would be safe. But then so is my fishing wire. So, and it's very flexible. So let's see. I get some of the stuff out of my way. And I kind of make it up as I go along. One bead I always do have is my clear 8/0s. These come in handy as turning beads, stop beads, or as part of the fringe if you want to lengthen the fringe out. And I also have the silver lined clear, which I also like. I'm a great believer in clear because it adds light to the project. So I have my face. Oh, I'll show you something else that I use. I don't know if I can fit it in because it's pretty tight. I also have a magnifying visor, and I've had this for years. I don't even know where you can get it anymore. But I started wearing this when I was doing detail work for doll making, and it's a wonderful thing. I've gotten to the point that I can leave it on like a hat. My grandchildren think I look like a tinker, and one of the reasons I have a Tinkerbell hat is because I look like a tinker. So the magnifying lens helps, especially when you're looking at these beads for any length of time. So I usually work, I don't double my thread. I work with a long tail and probably an arm's length, which I cut. These magnifying lenses are also very good for being able to see this monofilament up close when you're trying to knot it and things. I do tie a knot, but then I do a couple of stitches to actually lock the stringing thread into the felt. And I will probably fast forward some of this part if I can. I'm not very good at all that yet. So anyway, I've got my thread. Here's the face. I'm right-handed, and this is just my preference. I always start here and I'm kind of coming in from a slant, so it goes through. I get a good bite of the felt, and I bring it up kind of by the temple, and I pull it through. And there, the knot just came up to the back of the felt. And I'm going to go through another time. And I may catch the loop just to make another knot. I'm going to do my best to stay in frame. Okay, I'm going to set that down for a second. Adjust the tail of my thread. Okay, so you're going to pick beads up, and you're going to, I generally do 3 at a time, 4 max. Okay, my thread is coming to the top of the felt along the face pendant. I picked up 3 beads. I'm going to slide them down my thread till they come down to the face pendant. And then I'm going to work up towards the top of the head. So I'm going to lay my beads down along the side of the face. Find where that, I'm going to find where the top bead, when it's laid down, how far I go. And I'm going to go down through the felt, out through the back, and pull my thread tight. And that lays those 3 beads down. Then I'm going to come back up through the back of the felt towards the kind of the beginning of the 3 beads where the first bead is. And I'm going to go back through those 3 beads and lay them down. And that kind of locks them in so that they stay flat. And then I'm just going to pick up 3 more beads. Sometimes you're going to come up with a bead that doesn't fit on the needle, over the eye of the needle, and you're going to want to take that bead off, because if it doesn't fit on the eye of the needle the first time through, it's not going to make it when we have to go back through the beads. So there will be more than 1 layer of thread going through these beads. So you lay it down, you see where your last bead comes down on the felt, and you take your needle through that point. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be close. I usually try a little short more than a little long. And then I'm going to come back up through the felt towards the beginning of those 3 beads. Oh, that box is going to have to go. And then I'm going to go back to the last bead in the first group of 3 and lay them down. And go back, go back through. Now you went back through the last 4 beads. The last one on the first group and the 3 that you just put down. Dump some more beads out. And I'm going to close this box and get it out of my way before I throw the beads all over the mat. That would not make me happy. Okay, so I'm going to pick up 3 more beads. And when you get it, you'll get a rhythm. And this actually, it goes pretty quick. You put the 3 beads on, you bring them to the bottom of the thread where it's coming out of the head. You find the point where the 3rd bead lays down. Go down through the felt. Pull your needle through. Don't tangle your thread. Back up through this to the starting point where you laid those 3 down. come back up through the felt, go to the last bead of the last 3 that you added and go through the current 3. Pick up 3 more beads, down through to the bottom of the line, lay them down, go through the felt with the needle, pull through to the back, well, that one didn't catch. I didn't go far enough into the felt. The thread just pulled through the felt. So I'll go through the felt one more time. Lay them down flat. Go back to the beginning, to the last bead of the last group. Come up through the felt. Go through 4 beads and pull through. Pick up 3 more beads. Lay the beads down to the bottom by the face. Go back through the felt. Pull through to the back of the felt. Pull your tail through. Back to the beginning. So I've got 1, 2, 3 beads I just laid down. And then I have that 4th bead of the last group. So I'm coming back up through the felt, back towards that area of the last group. Then I'm going to go through that 4th bead of the last group, and I'm going to bring my needle through that bead and through the entire 3 that I just put on. And then pull the thread through those 4. Okay? And then I'm going to pick up 3 more beads. Not 4, 3. Pull them through. Go through the felt. Go back 4 beads. Come back up through the felt. Paying attention to the tail of your thread. Go through 4 beads, pull your thread through. Pick up 3 beads. Down through the felt. Back 4 beads. And come through the felt. And go through those 4 beads. Back to the end. Pick up 3 more beads. Now you're going to notice that it's a little loose. And that's okay, because you are going to work thread back through these beads, and you don't want it to be too tight, because then it's going to be more difficult to handle. So I've got the 3 extra beads. I am going to just snug it up a little, because you want to kind of maintain a constant tension on your thread. Back through the back. Back through to the back, I guess I should say. Go back 4 beads, come up through the front of the felt. Now I have a couple of extra beads that seem to be popping up. They don't want to lay down flat. So I'm just going to go back through those 2 beads too. Wherever you see you have like a problem where something doesn't seem to be laying flat, just go back through it with your thread and kind of snug it down. And it'll help lay that bottom bezel flat. Now you're not, I say it lay it flat, but you're not really laying the beads flat. They're actually standing up on their side in a little row. Lost my needle. There it is. I'm going to pick up 3 more beads. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. I'm probably going to fast forward, and I will meet you back when I get all the way back around. Okay, so I think I'm not going to use the cream soda beads. I'm going to just use the 8O Dynamites in white. I think that'll be the easiest to see. And this is just to learn, so probably being able to see easier is a good thing. Okay, so we're right back around to where we started. I've got the half hitch knot in. The first row of beading is on. So we've got the baseline of the bezel, the felt, the beads, the face. Okay, so what you do is you go through a bead to get your bead stringing material back to the top. So we've gone through a bead. So here's the chant. go through a bead, you pick up a bead, you skip the next bead after the one that you just went through, which would be this one, and you go through the next bead and pull your line through. So then you've gone through the bead, you pick up the bead, you skip the next bead after the one you just went through, and you go through the next bead. Just trying to make sure I keep remembering to pull my tail thread through. And these beads are sitting up towards the plane of the face. Okay? And you can see the gap in between the two white beads. That's the skip bead. So we're going to skip the next bead, we're going to pick up a bead, and we're going to go through the bead after the skip bead. Which is that bead? Okay? Pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through the next bead. Pretty easy, right? Pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through the next bead. Now some of my beads are a little loose, and as I'm going through, you know, my felt wobbles a little bit, and I have to kind of keep using my finger to push my beads towards the top and hang on to the felt a little bit. But as we go around, this will all tighten up. Okay, so we went through a bead. Now we're going to pick up a bead, skip the next bead from the one we went through, and go through the bead after the skip bead. Okay, pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through a bead. And that's pretty much it all the way around. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, hopefully I'm in the shot, go through a bead. And we got beads going everywhere. Look at that. It'll be okay. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, and go through the bead after the bead you skipped. Make sure you don't twist your thread up, because that wouldn't be too pleasant. You'd have to take it all back out. Okay, so we picked up a bead, we're going to skip a bead, and we're going to go through a bead. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through a bead. Whoops. Get my hand out of the loop. Don't twist my thread. Okay. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through a bead. Okay. Pull my tail out. Pick up a bead, skip a bead. Still working on the top of the pendant on the face part. You know, you got the face part towards you. Okay, pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through a bead. And this can feel kind of awkward until you're used to it. And sometimes the beads on that beginning row are a little tight, and the beads on this row want to roll to the bottom, but it'll be alright, because when we're done going around this side, we'll switch to smaller beads, or I may even just go around once with just my beading thread to kind of pull them all into line, all the white beads. Alright, skipping the bead, going through a bead, pick up a bead, skip a bead. Sometimes I have to remind myself what bead I'm coming out of because I'm skipping the bead after the bead that I'm coming out of, and I'm going through a bead. Skipping a bead, pick up a bead, go through a bead. Skip a bead, pick up a bead, go through a bead. For me, it's really pick up a bead, find the skip bead, go through the next bead. I hope I'm holding my hands down low enough. Now we're almost all the way back down around to the beginning. Oops, my thread got caught around previous beads, so I just have to go back and straighten it out. That happens. And with monofilament, sometimes it's hard to go back and find what you did. Okay. Now I'm coming up to the end, and I've got to pick up one more bead. I'm going to skip a bead and go through a bead. And that brings me right to almost that first white bead that I put on. Okay? So I'm right here in between. Oops. I am right here. Okay? And here's my thread. Here's the last bead I put on. Here's the first, well, the last white bead I put on. Let's see if I can keep it in the frame. Alright, the last white bead I put on, and the first white bead that I put on. Okay? I think, let's see. I'm just going to set it down for just a second. Okay. Now you see how kind of wonky my white beads are. I'm not going to worry about that yet because I've still got another row I have to put on. The thing I'm wondering right now is, do I put on another row of white or should I go back to black? Would that be easier for you to see? And right now, I'm thinking that I might actually do a row of these silver lined clear. So let me move my white beads out of the way. And I will open up these silver line clear. I just want to denote the difference in the rows. I'm trying to make it a little easier to see. Alright, so when you're going to start the next row, you have to step up. Okay, because right now we're on the same row. The last bead and the first bead are on the same plane, the same level. So in order to start the next one, we're going to go up through that first bead. We're not going to pick up another bead. We're just going to take our needle and thread and go through the first bead that we did. Okay, now we're going to pick up another bead. And this row is kind of easy because you're skipping that black bead in the center and you're going right through that next white bead in the same row. So essentially what we're doing here is we're going to pick up a clear bead and run it from where we're coming out of the white bead into the next white bead. So this one's pretty easy to see where you're going. And as you put this next row of beads in, like I said, running it from one white bead to the next white bead with the little clear bead on your string. Well, it's not really a little clear bead, it's the same size. All the beads that we've put on here so far are 8/0 seed beads. They're all the same size. And that's what that's going to look like. It's got the silver line beads in between the white beads, and it has the black beads on the bottom. So we're going to pick up another silver bead, and we're going to go right through the next white bead. And we're going to pick up another silver bead and go through the next white bead. Trying to keep the thread from tangling. You don't want the thread tangling. Okay, we're going right through the next white bead. Picking up a silver bead, a silver line clear bead, and going right through the next white bead. Another silver lined clear bead, the next white bead. Now this is a little roughly, and if I had gone to a smaller bead, it would pull it in nicer. So what I'm going to have to do is, like, after I finish this row, I will go to a small bead, and I will finish my beading up with smaller beads that'll pull this all in tighter because the row will be smaller. Right now I've got a ruffle going on, which is why it is hard to use the same size beads in subsequent rows. Usually I do a smaller bead. So my next row will be smaller. I won't use 8/0s, I'll use 11s. Just have to keep holding on to the thread. Okay, so you get the idea with this one. It's just pick up a bead and go through the next bead on the same row. And like I said, it is kind of loose. You can see it goes away from the head here. It's not really coming up over the head yet. The smaller beads in the next and subsequent rows will tighten that around to make it more of a tight bezel. Okay? So I will finish this up and be right back. Okay, so I'm back. Gone all the way around. You can see how roughly this layer is. I've got the last silver bead on my needle. Find the viewfinder. And what I'm going to do is go through that last white bead where we started. Actually, okay, so we've got the clear bead there coming out of that next in line after the last white bead. Now I'm going to go through that first white bead where we started, and I'm going to go up, step up through that first silver line clear bead and pull my thread through. Okay, so now we're up on row 4. We have the black row, the white row, the silver line clear row, and now we are going to go to now those were all 8/0 seed beads. So now we're going to go down to these little tiny, well, they're not little tiny, they're not the smallest. These are 11O frosted white beads. Now this you could have a little trouble with because it's got to go over the base of your needle. So if the holes in the beads aren't consistent, you may have to stop and take a bead off that doesn't work and find another bead that does. All right, but this is the same thing. So we know we just finished the silver, or the silver lined clear row. So we're just going from silver lined clear bead to silver lined clear bead, picking up the frosted bead and going through the next silver lined clear bead in the row. And you can see that these little beads are going to tighten this up nicely. So I'm going to pick up another frosted white bead and I'm going to go through the next silver lined clear bead. Frosted white bead through the next silver lined clear bead, not tangling my thread. That was a tug because that little bead didn't want to come all the way through. Next silver line clear bead, all the way through. Pick up another frosted white bead, find the next silver lined clear bead, and pull. Okay, another bead, through a bead, pull. Another frosted white bead. Oh, wait a minute. See, I got ahead of myself. I went one clear silver line clear bead too far, and I skipped one I should have gone through. So you really do have to pay attention to what you're doing, especially when the rows are kind of still wonky. Okay, good. And go through. Okay, back on track. And pull my thread around to the back, or just, hold it behind my work so I'm not getting it tangled and I can see. This is a fairly easy beading stitch. I mean, it's pretty much the only one I really know. I really enjoy doing this. I find it relaxing when I'm not trying to remember that I'm supposed to be staying in range of the camera viewfinder. So I'm picking up one of the frosted beads, which is hiding there behind my fingers. And I came out of that silver line bead and I'm going in the next silver line bead. Okay, well, my battery died that time. I'm still where I left off. I haven't missed anything, although at this point you may wish you had. Okay, so I'm going to pick up another bead and go through the next silver lined clear bead. I'm trying to pull this kind of tight. And I'm just continuing to pick up one of those frosted white beads and go through the next silver line clear bead. That's one of the nice things if you use different color beads, at least you know what ones you're aiming for. Sometimes if you're using all the same color, you have to really pay attention to what your next bead is. Okay. I think this will only be another minute or so, and I'm going to continue around my next row using these same beads, and that should be the last bezel row. And that's one of the reasons to use the larger beads at the base, is because then you can work your fringe into them, because you're going to have thread going back into beads that have already had quite a bit of thread in them, and sometimes that can get a little tight and a little tough. So if you have beads that are already resisting being strung, they're probably not good beads, unless they're the top rows, not good beads to use on this type of a project. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, one more bead to put on for this row. And I'm going to go through the silver bead, the last silver bead, and then I'm going to go through that first frosted white bead from this row and pull through. Okay, so now we're on what I hope is going to be the last row that should have this bezel nice and tight. If it doesn't, I may have to try another row, but I think I'm going to be out of space. We'll see. So I'm going to pick up another one of these frosted white beads. Now we're coming out of a frosted white bead. We've got a frosted white bead on our needle, and we're going to go into the next frosted white bead. Pick up a frosted white bead, go into the next frosted white bead. Pick up a frosted white bead, go into the next frosted white bead. Okay, and we're just going to do that all the way around. And I think I'm going to have to do a third row using the frosted white beads, because this top is still really loose. Okay, so just keep on going. Pick up a bead, go through the next frosted white bead. Pick up a bead, go through the next frosted white bead. I'll stop here and show you. Let's see if you can see it. Let's see. It looks like there's two frosted white beads together. It's starting to create a pattern. So in another row, it'll be three frosted white beads next to each other. So we'll pick up another one and go through the next one. Okay. I think from here, I'm going to fast forward the rest of this. Actually, I'm just going to finish this, and I will come back when I'm done with this row. So I will be right back. Okay, well, I finished that row, and we're still looking a little bit roughly. Not quite as bad as it was, but it's still roughly. So I think I'm going to do one more row using the same beads, and then I may have to put like some drop beads or something across her forehead, just to help tighten up across the top. Right now what I'm going to do is my thread's getting a little bit short, so what I'm going to do is show you how I tie it off. Now we've gone around how have we got around? I think we have. I think that's all of them. There are times you kind of lose track. So anyway, I'm going to not tie this thread off. So I just see where I'm coming up, and I'm just going to go all the way back down right through the felt and pull that together. Not too tight because I don't want those beads to bend down into the towards the inside of the, between the bezel and the face pendant. And I'm just going to find the edge of the felt on the back. I'm going to run my needle. You know, you just slide your needle through the thread so it like goes into the thread and takes a bite, and then you put pressure on the side where your thumb is, push down, and that should pop as you push forward and down. The point of the needle should pop back up, and that will add a stitch on the back. Now you want to make that as short as you can, and then just grab the loop and make a knot. And you could do a short, just do a small bite. You can see how teeny that is, because I want this knot. Of course, now I'm got this thread caught on my ring, so I pulled the tail a little short. You're seeing it all here. I'm going to pull that through. Find the loop again, right here. Put my needle through it, pull my thread through it, and do another knot. And that should hold it. And then I'm just going to take my scissors and cut my thread. Okay. And I'm just throwing out what's left. Okay, and then I have my spider wire, monofilament. Well, it's not like the sewing monofilament. This is fishing monofilament, which is very strong. I'm threading my needle. And my dog's whining. Okay, so I've got my tail doubled over. I've got about an arm's length of line. I'm just going to put my needle down for a minute. I'm find the bottom of the thread, and just tie a knot. I usually like to tie a double knot, and it's just 2 overhand knots. It's nothing secret or special. Okay, I cut the tail off a little bit because I don't need it sticking up in my way. Pulling all my thread down so it's together. Find where my knot is on the back, and I'm just bringing my thread back up through till the knot comes home. Going back down through the felt again. Trying not to hang my pliers up on it. Oh my goodness. Untangle your pliers and get them out of the way. Okay. Pulling my thread all the way back through to the back, and then one more time, just going back up to the front. Okay. And I'm just finding that last one that we did and stepping back up to the next row, which means going through that first bead on the row and stepping up into the next row. Okay, and then I'm going to do another row of these little white beads. So it's one row is just like the last row. Find the bead, pick up the bead, skip a bead, go into the next bead on the same row. I mean, if I was using all of these little frosted white beads for the whole thing, I'd probably borrow a trick from knitting, which I don't do very well, and put a marker at the first bead of the row as I start the row, so that when I get back around, should I need to stop and change my thread or do whatever, I know where that first bead is, so I know where my step up is without too much difficulty. And you know, this is pretty forgiving too. You're going to put all kinds of fringe and stuff in that'll connect into these beaded rows. So if you make a mistake or two, it's really not going to show. So I wouldn't, what my mother used to call, I wouldn't sweat the small stuff. Okay, so that's all I'm doing, is I'm continuing on around, you know, picking up a bead, skipping a bead, going into the next bead in the same row. This is what it's looking like. And I'm going to finish this row and I'll be back. Okay, I'm going to do one more row and tighten up. Okay, I'm gonna finish this and I will be back. Okay, and so I've gone all the way around the face just with the thread and pulled it all tight. So now the bezel is nice and tight around the face, and everything is firm. So I went from the front of the pendant through the felt and came out in the back again. So now I've got the pendant upside down, and I'm looking at the felt on the back, and I'm going to take another one of those little bites in the felt. See, where I just do a single little running stitch, go down, and then tilt the needle back up with some pressure and come back up through the back of the felt. And then I'm going to pull until I get that little loop to form. I'm going to put my needle back through it and pull again, creating my first knot. So now I have a knot, one knot, a single knot. I'm going to do that again, taking a little bite, needle going in and popping right back up with downward pushing pressure from my thumb. Grab a hold and pull it forward. Pull my tail section through. And then I have that little loop that forms. And I'm just going to put my needle through it. And I'm going to pull that down and create my next knot, keeping my tail out of the way. Okay, and I'm going to cut my thread at this point because we're done with the bezel. And that's what the face pendant looks like so far. We have the polymer clay, we have the felt, and we've created the bezel, the beaded bezel. So the next section, we're going to be coming back in and going through these 8OC beads with some fringe beads. And this one's not very thick, so the bale may be a sewn-on bale rather than a beaded bale. But we'll see. So I'll see you in the next section. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. Bye for now.